Hi, I'm Phil. I'm a psychotherapeutic counsellor and a trauma therapist. Today I'm going to speak about love bombing and some of the reasons behind its use, because some of these reasons might not be as obvious as you might think. And it's useful to have an idea about what might be going on if we find ourselves in a situation in which we're being seduced. So, even though there's obviously manipulation going on when people are love bombing others, I'm going to say that not everybody uses this technique for the same reason. And the reason why some are doing it are not always driven by conscious areas of the brain, which means that for some people, the love bombing might serve a deeper purpose. So, I'm going to explain some of those purposes here so we can separate the more toxic motives from some of the other reasons why people might use this technique to seduce you. So basically, we could say that love bombing is a type of seduction that involves giving excessive amounts of contact, attention, gifts, flattery, or even services and support to someone else with the aim of receiving something in return. And like I just said, there are often conscious and unconscious motivators that drive people to seduce others in this way, and that can be dependent on personality style, how we were brought up, all sorts of factors. So we also need to consider that some people might be love bombing others for multiple reasons. So there's likely to be some crossovers between the examples that I'm going to speak about. So it's often the case that people who use love bombing present a false self or another version of themselves at the outset as a means, as a part of that seduction. And this is obviously a good way to get something from someone, be someone that somebody needs you to be. But sometimes the use of a false self is also because the person doing the seducing has very low self confidence or a belief that they're not likable or lovable. So to get you to like them, they feel that they need to be someone different than who they are. So the first example I'm going to speak of relates to people who idealize others, or people who are drawn to put people on a pedestal or see them as rescuing knights. So because the other is genuinely seen as special by the person who idealizes, the attention that they give to them is often overly enthusiastic, and this can often be experienced as love bombing by the receiver. Now, there's sometimes a difference between people who use love bombing to seduce others and people who idealize. And that difference is that the person who idealizes does usually believe that the person that they're attempting to form an attachment with is the perfect person for them. So their love bombing is with a view to forming a long time relationship with the idealized person. They're not after some sort of transient fix. So in this case, the attention being given in the early days of the connection is genuine, even if it's excessive. But if we're receiving that, we still need to be mindful that people with secure attachment styles don't tend to idealize others. So if we meet someone who's idealizing, we need to be mindful of that. And people who do idealize can be fickle and change how they think about people if that person no longer fits their idealized role. So if you fall off the pedestal for whatever reason, or they think you have, they might start to feel have very different reactions to you. So another area where love bombing can be used can be around addiction and control. So if we think about people who have a strong need for control in relationships, they might love bomb others because they're working towards getting someone addicted to all the emotional or erotic attention that they're giving them. And if they can get them addicted to all of that, they will typically then start to hold their attention to create insecurity in the other, so they can be more easily controlled. Because it stands to reason, because as the person in the relationship with the most needs is the one with the least power. So in effect, the roles in the relationship have now changed if this occurs, as the seduced person has now become the love bomber of the other as they try to get them to adore them again like they did at the beginning, which isn't going to happen as it because it's the false self that's been attached to. We would have fallen in love with the seductive ploy, something that wasn't real, which means that it won't be real again if you get breadcrumbs of it, if you try to leave the relationship. So it's really important with people, if you do get addicted to trying to chase in somebody for how they were at the beginning, to actually be realistic about what you're hoping to get. Because if you have fallen in love with the false self that was projected through the love bombing, that's not real. It's unlikely you're going to get it consistently from that person. They might not be able to do that. So avoidant personalities often use love bombing too. So if you think of avoidant personality styles as being on a functionality scale that runs from slightly anxious in relationships at one end of the scale to keep away from me at the other end, How far someone is along that scale is going to determine how capable they are to maintain a connection with others in relationships. So some people with avoidant personality styles are powerfully drawn to the fantasy of getting involved with someone. So love bombing at the initial stage might be typical behavior for them. It's when it comes to meeting up with you that the problems are going to start, because their avoidance level is going to determine their level, how much contact they can tolerate. So if their tolerance is low, then physically meeting someone might be a step in a direction that's too uncomfortable for them. So you might at that point get a lot of messages and emails from this person, but the meetups just won't seem to happen. But if they can get beyond the love bombing contact phase and they do arrange to meet you, you can usually expect a load of cancellations, rearrangements, and vagueness, as their avoidant personality works on getting them to sabotage the contact. That they can't help it; it's just what's going to happen. So logically, we can assume from this that others who are not so far along the avoidance scale will use love bombing for the same reason. But because they have more tolerance of contact, you might be able to get more involved with them for a time before they feel the need to pull away. So a rule of thumb would be to use a less is more approach if you're involved with someone who is avoidant, as they're less likely to pull away or feel engulfed by you if you're not there. But there are obviously downsides to this. If you want a consistent relationship, you're not going to get one. The avoidant person often, as you pull away, will be drawn back to love bombing you again, and so then you'll go back to them, and then their avoidant process will mean they'll have to push you away again. So you could get in one of those sorts of push pull cycles. So another reason that some people might love bomb others has its roots in an unconscious sadistic need to make others feel how it felt for them when they were chasing unresponsive parents for attention as a child. So in effect, your seduction by this person is more like an initiation into a revenge fantasy, and you're there to have the rug pulled out from under you once you're hooked to the love bombing. So your part in this relationship is to chase them for attention and be continuously ignored or rejected, like they possibly were as children. If you if you think about it, if you also spent a lot of time as a child chasing unavailable parents for attention, then this type of masochism on your part might have some appeal for you, because that's what relationships were for you. So it might draw you to chase this sort of person if that was something that you've previously experienced. It also assists you to avoid intimacy if you have an avoidant attachment style, attaching to someone like this, and create anxiety for yourself if you have an anxious attachment style. So meeting someone who has this sadistic need to pull the rug out from people can serve a lot of purposes for people who've had probably tough times growing up. So caregiving personalities or guilt-driven personalities can love bomb too in their own way. And even though their seduction of you meets their own needs at an unconscious level, the type of love bombing they do can be more altruistic in nature. It can be kinder, you know. So because caregiving personalities are often driven by guilt, they work to appease their guilt by giving to others what they once needed. So, which to no one's surprise is going to be a shed load of attention. So they might love bomb you with helpful gestures, practical gifts, and physical aid if you have some sort of physical need. And if they sense shame or fear in you, or a shortfall in self-esteem or consistency, then they might become very consistent, reassuring, and loving to help you feel safe in the world. So even though the caregivers' hearts are in the right place, it does benefit them to have people in their lives who have emotional or physical problems to solve. So they are meeting the needs of others to meet the needs of their own, which means that if you form a relationship with them, you're going to have something that needs mending, because they're not going to probably feel too comfortable if you don't. It doesn't mean to say they're bad people. It's just, without that problem to solve, they don't really feel that they have much value. So some people may also lavish you with gifts, praise, and attention, because at some point in the future, they may want you to feel that you're obligated to them or that you owe them in some way. And the belief that you now owe them gives them a license to guilt and shame you if you ask for any further needs of yours to be met. So this approach can often be a slowed down version of love bombing. They can sort of drip feed you this sort of stuff, and it can be subtly done. But a good sign that you've been fallen foul of this one would be if you were suddenly starting to feel guilty or fearful of upsetting the other after they've been giving you all of this stuff, but now you feel like you owe them. So that would be a transference to be aware of. So And then now we come to the erotic part, I guess. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of people love bombing others for sex, but not everyone who love bombs people for sex is doing so just for the sex alone. Some might be doing it because they need others to be sexually attracted to them to counter body dysmorphia fears that might have them believing that they're in some way unattractive, or to manage vulnerable egos that need constant erotic attention to make them feel like they have some value or importance to others. So, in both of these examples, someone being erotically attracted to them might give them a temporary reprieve from their insecurities, but that reprieve's not going to be long lasting as their insecurity issues are deep rooted and not something that sex can permanently cure. So sex is really just a band-aid on a wound that's far too big for a plaster. And they're gonna keep needing that. So to feel secure in a relationship. So if you don't find that you don't have the same need for that level of sexual activity in the relationship, this person is probably going to start to feel insecure, or they'll need to look elsewhere because it's probably the only way that they can manage their self-esteem. So then we come to those who might be bombing others simply because their ego needs huge amounts of attention and their goal is solely to get as many people as they can to pay them attention. So in this scenario, many of those who are initiated into the seducers fan club will never actually get to meet them because they will be just used as an attention source, usually by text or email, to fill the gaps they have between meeting the ones that they do want a little bit more of something from. So these seducers are also quite easy to recognize, as there will often be lots of inconsistency, vagueness, and delaying tactics because they're just juggling too many balls, and because typically they also have avoidant personalities. So which means that they're also going to be drawn to triangulating relationships or having several sources of attention on the go to maximize attention and minimize the risk of intimacy that might occur if they were to form a healthy relationship with a consistent other. One person isn't enough because typically if they attach with one person, that would trigger their deep rooted abandonment issues, which caused their avoidant personality in the first place. So if they can have several forms of attention going on at the same time, they can dilute that intimacy so it doesn't trigger the abandonment issues. And if they do get abandoned by one, they've got other people they can get attention from straight away. So they've always got a source of attention. So if we think about this then, so if we have a secure attachment style or a healthy functioning emotional system, we're far less likely to be drawn in by someone love bombing us because we simply don't need that level of validation to feel good about ourselves. In fact, if we're secure, the love bombing would more than likely seem childlike, desperate, maybe even engulfing. You might even feel sudden anxiety or invaded by the other if they're doing this, which could potentially be a signal that a predator is close. You know, that your body could be warning you. So this would be your body's healthy reaction to being around manipulative or dangerous personality types. So it's best to listen to these feelings rather than what the love bomber is telling or showing you, because the love bomber's process is trying to seduce you to listen or to what they want you to hear. They don't want you listening to your body because that might be telling you something different. So they are going to be trying to bamboozle you with all of the information or the adoration they're giving you. They want you to focus on that so you don't focus on your body. So if we didn't get mirrored accurately in childhood, or we were starved of the attention we needed, then that love-starved little part of us might feel that they're finally getting what their parents couldn't give them when they're getting love bombed. So this makes us extremely vulnerable to not picking up the signals within our body that the person seducing us might not be safe. So obviously not everybody who uses love bombing has a dangerous personality style, but nevertheless, we need to slow things down at the beginnings of relationships. Because if you think about it rationally, at a biological level, we're not programmed to trust people that we've just met. Because 50,000 years ago, meeting someone outside of your community or tribe was most likely a dangerous situation to find yourself in. It's why many animals don't trust animals from other packs or groups. It's just inherent in us. So to actually take our time and remember this is probably a really useful thing when we meet new people. So also people who are using seductive techniques to sort of ingratiate themselves into people's lives, they often struggle with consistency because they're having to put on a false self. They're having to be someone they're not. as a part of the the initiation into the relationship with them, which means which takes up a lot of energy, and also they have to remember about a lot of the stuff that they're saying or they're doing, especially if they're doing it to a lot of people at the same time. So this means if you slow the honeymoon period down and take your time to get to know them, the cracks in their seductive technique usually come a bit more obvious if you slow things down. Because like we say, it's a lot when you're being someone you're not, it's a lot to remember. So some people who love bomb might also be playing the long game, so they might be able to show some consistency for a time, but typically they get complacent once you've become more deeply involved, and then the mask will typically begin to slip. So a rule of thumb would be that someone who is consistent will remain consistent. So they're unlikely to show large personality shifts in short periods of time. That needs to be a huge sort of red flag. So if the consistency of the other changes, then you need to listen to your body and challenge any urges you might have that want to get you to seduce them back to being the love bomber they were before. Because at this point, if you don't, then the tables have been turned, and it might now be you that's love bombing them, and that might have been their aim all along, because they don't really need to do much more then, and because they've got more control in the relationship, because you've got the most needs. They're getting a lot of ego attention because you're chasing them, so we really need to be mindful of that, of the consistency. People who are consistent, they don't change. They are consistent. So hopefully this video was useful for you. And if you want me to describe any parts of it in more detail in another video, just leave me a message in the comments and I'll see if I can do you a video. Or if you want me to explain a little bit more about what type of, what personality styles might be drawn towards which forms of seduction, I can see if I can do something about that. And thanks for watching, and take care. Goodbye.